Hey, I'm Trey. Police know what most people don't. People die every day at the hands of someone else unexpectedly, and some of those people are serial killers. That's what inspired me to start this channel. If you're into real stories about serial killers from around the world, spanning centuries, then this is the channel for you. So hit that button so you can be reminded of new content that I upload every Tuesday and Thursday. Please leave any comments or suggestions in the comments section. Well, if you're ready, let's get started. Marcelo Costa DeAndre, born 1967 in the country of Brazil. Marcelo lived initially with his parents. His father was very abusive to his mother. He was regularly ignored by his parents because they were so wrapped up with their own marital problems. His parents thought it would be a good idea if they sent him to live with his grandmother for some time. Things were good for a while at his grandmother's house because he was being treated well. Unfortunately, this was until Marcelo was sent back to live with his abusive parents again. Marcelo alleged that after he was sent back to his parents' house, he was sexually assaulted by one of his parents' male associates. Obviously, this took an emotional toll on Marcelo, which caused him to go from one emotional extreme to another. Being so emotionally wound up caused him to become withdrawn and distant from others. For the record, I wasn't able to find out specifically what happened for Marcelo to get removed from his home, but he was then admitted to a boys' school for a few years. Living at the boys' school wasn't a safe refuge for him either. He was bullied by the other children, and they nicknamed him the retard. When Marcelo reached age 14, he was ejected from the boys' school program. This was due to no fault of his own because that was the age limit for the program. This left Marcelo homeless. Being a young child, he had no ideas on how to support himself, so he was persuaded to become a prostitute to survive. Now dealing with more depression as a child than most people see in their entire lives, Marcelo attempted suicide but was unsuccessful. At 16 years old, he met and moved in with a homosexual man in which he had a stable relationship with. That man introduced Marcelo to a religion and they began attending church regularly. Although the man took care of him financially and emotionally, Marcelo felt compelled to continue to prostitute himself. This kid was more than likely emotionally defective at this point and needed intense therapy. Eventually, the relationship dissolved. At some point, Marcelo began to build a closer relationship with God. He was also seemingly beginning to turn his life around by attending church on his own regularly. He found a job and refrained from prostitution. Per his admission, Marcelo began to get involved with a religious cult. Marcelo would listen to the sermons intently. He would deconstruct everything that he read or was told to him during those sermons. During one of those services he attended, he was told that when children die, they go to heaven. This sunk into his psyche. He truly believed that if kids were killed, they would be in a better place. In contrast, only adults could go to hell if they weren't right with God. Marcelo became obsessed with listening to this cult worship service and also confessed to being addicted to reading pornographic magazines. Why am I not shocked by this? Of course, pornography would be okay if you're in a cult. In December 1991, a 10-year-old boy by the name of Altair Abreu had left with his older brother Ivan to go to a family friend's home for lunch. The two of them were approached by Marcelo and was persuaded to follow him with a promise to earn money. The two children followed Marcelo on a bus ride to an isolated beach. Marcelo then attempted to kiss Ivan and was rejected. He then struck him in the head, which knocked Ivan to the ground. Marcelo then raped him as the little brother Altair watched in terror. When Marcelo was finished assaulting Ivan, he then strangled him to death in front of his brother. He told Altair that his brother was sleeping, so he should just follow him. Out of fear, Altair did as he was instructed. Marcelo took Altair to the local gas station. He then forced Altair to watch him as he washed himself after the sexual assaulting of his brother. Marcelo then forced the child to follow him back to his hometown. Marcelo made promises to live with Altair, and Altair agreed out of fear. Altair continued to follow Marcelo wherever he went until the following morning. As Marcelo was sound asleep, Altair fled from him to his home and told his older sisters. They in turn notified the police. The police found the body of Ivan and initially thought it was death by drowning until they were informed by the family what was told to them by Altair. The police located Marcello and he confessed to the murder of Ivan. During that same police interview, he chose to openly confess to additional murders. Marcello confessed to killing as many as 13 additional young boys. He also gave explicit details on how he committed each homicide. The first murder was in April of 1991. Marcello encountered a young unnamed child selling candies on the street. He was able to lure the little child to an isolated location. Marcello then tried to force him on the child, but he fought back. He then struck the boy on his head, rendering him unconscious. Marcello then raped the child. After he was done, Marcello then strangled him to death. The feeling of control and power sexually aroused Marcello, and he couldn't stop himself from committing more murders after that. Marcello's next murder was a boy by the name of Anderson Gomez Goulart. He was 11 years old at the time. He used the same method as the other murder by persuading the child to follow him with the promise of payment for his time. Marcello struck him, rendering him unconscious. He then proceeded to rape the child, and then afterwards he strangled the child to death. For some strange reason, Marcello chose to drain the child of blood and capture some of the blood in a bowl. Marcello took the bowl of blood and left the body where he killed him. He later confessed to drinking that bowl of blood. Marcello committed the next murder, which was June of 1991. An 11-year-old boy by the name of Odair Santos, whom he met begging for food on the street, became his next victim. Santos promised money to the child to lure him to an isolated soccer field. Santos fought off Marcello from sexually assaulting him, but was murdered in the process. This enraged Marcello, so he went home for dinner immediately afterwards. Later that same evening, he came back to the crime scene and then decapitated the body. Marcello stated that this was for revenge for the children who had teased him back in the boarding school. I guess in his mind, this child's mental toughness reminded him a lot of the bullies that used to torment Marcello at school. The police asked Marcello why he only murdered children, and he responded that if he had murdered adults and they did not have a relationship with God, they would automatically be sent to hell if he were to kill them. Yup, that makes logical sense to me. Marcello was charged for multiple murders. The total number of homicides were not provided. He was found guilty for those murders. A psychological evaluation was completed on Marcello and he was diagnosed as insane. He was committed to a psychiatric hospital. They didn't really need a psychiatrist to figure that one out. Well, if you enjoy more stories such as these, click the button so you can be reminded of new content that I upload every Tuesday and Thursday. God bless and stay safe.